All right, well, folks, cheers. Welcome to another What's on Tap at Knuth Brewing Company. I thought it was only fitting to have a River West Stein today. And, Jim, it's an honor to have you. We have Jim Klisch from Lakefront Brewery going on 40 years.
Well,
Close,
38.
right?
Yeah, we're going to be 38 in December.
Yeah.
December 2nd.
So cheers. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. My honor. I've wanted to see the place for a long time.
Well, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but you have a big role, you probably don't know it, in why we're here, why Knuth Brewing Company exists. My wife brought me to Lakefront Brewery for my birthday. I think it was my 22nd or 23rd birthday. And you were given the tour. I think it was like a Wednesday. And man, I was just kind of like getting into craft beer, and you had the coolest job, man. And and I think you crowned me Bung King that day because it was my birthday, and that was back when you had the old bottling line and the Laverne and Shirley song and
the Hoff Stevens kegs.
Yeah,
with the bung hole on it.
Yeah, it was awesome. So
well,
Lakefront's always had a special place in our heart, and we always try to keep you guys in the rotation. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Very kind words on your part there.
No, it's awesome. So I was hoping, we've kind of become friends over the years. So, going back to that, like for me, it was a dream come true. When I saw you on the tour, and then when we opened in 2015, and then I think the first time I met you was in Mayville. At the Mayville Beer Fest,
right?
And I remember you were there, and my wife was there. I was like, "Hey, that's Jim Klisch," and so you've been kind and gracious to me over the years. So thanks for coming up.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Great to be here. Good to be in beautiful downtown Ripon.
Well, and it's a nice day for a drive, right?
It was a wonderful day.
Get out of the city a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very easy to get here, folks. 23 right into Ripon.
So I was hoping we could. I know you're a big history guy. I'm a big history guy. Sure. I thought we could maybe just talk about how you got started and Lakefront's beginnings and middle and I was reading last night. I was just doing a little research, and I found out. So your grandpa worked at Schlitz.
Yep, he was truck driver for Schlitz.
Truck driver for how long?
I don't even know.
Okay.
But he got the job right after Prohibition. So it started in 1933, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, right when they were starting to hire.
Yeah.
And he kept it into the 60s, early 60s.
Okay. So he got out right before the downfall then. Is that?
No, right.
Yeah, because they kind of folded like late 60s. Is that right? Or
it was whenever they put the enzyme in the beer and then the sales went down.
Yeah.
They had the labor problems and closed in about 76, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Or was it maybe the 80s?
I think they were earlier. I think it was in the 70s. So your grandfather worked at Schlitz.
Right.
And then I read that your parents owned a tavern?
Parents owned a tavern in Lublin, Gilman, Wisconsin. Taylor County is where it is. Right outside the Chequamegon National Forest. So
okay.
Right after they were married, Dad took over a tavern. It was called the Nightingale.
Cool.
And so we have that history. But many of the family members on my mom's side owned taverns in Price and Taylor County too.
So up north then?
Up north, right.
Is that where were you born?
No, north? I was born in Milwaukee. But
okay.
Lived on the farm for a couple of years when I was pretty young.
Yeah.
And the way the families were back then, especially farming families, you're going up there all the time, to make the rounds and visit everyone. I remember when Dad would have vacations from his factory job, you go up there to help hay, so.
Sure.
We were up there, we'd see on the farm there. A lot of memories.
Yeah,
visit the cousins.
My grandpa and uncle had a dairy farm in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And so that was our family trips too. Whenever we got away, we either went to Central Illinois or Central Michigan. We never went to Disney World or anything like that.
Rural areas,
yeah.
Right?
But I loved it. I remember getting to learn how to drive a tractor, and I'd ride around with my grandpa, and yeah, it was fun. Good stuff. So then so I was reading, you and your brother Russ and started Lakefront Brewery, right?
Right.
And I was reading, there was a quote that Russ said, he credits you for the beginning because he gave you a book. What was the book that he gave you?
Well, like so many stories, like your story,
Yeah.
we started with homebrewing.
Yep.
So we were living together in a house, two bachelors. He was just I had the home, and he was just out of college, so he was staying over with me.
So you're older then?
I'm older by 4 years.
Okay.
And one day he asked me, or I asked him, how do you make beer? Because he's a chemical engineer. How do you make beer? I figure you don't. But he kind of danced around the topic. I could tell he really didn't know.
Yeah.
And I forgot about it. Because we're both beer drinkers at the time, two young bachelors. And my birthday was probably a couple of weeks afterwards, and he gave me a book on homebrewing. It was pretty rudimentary.
Do you remember the name of the book?
I don't.
Okay.
I can't remember it. It was primarily just an extract book.
Yeah.
How to put it together.
That's how I got started. My father-in-law gave me a homebrew kit for my bachelor party, and then I got Charlie Papazian's The Complete Joy of Homebrewing.
The Bible.
Yeah, exactly. That's in fact, when we went into the homebrew shop, the guy told me, "This is the Bible. This is what you need." Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
so still reference it.
Yeah, me too.
For a few pointers.
Yep.
So I got the book and read it and figured, well, I'm going to try home brewing. I got this here. It looks like I understand at least extract brewing. So there was a cooperage place in town, and they had a sideline as far as selling homebrew supplies. So I went down there, and the owner was there, and I said, I'd like to start home brewing. He said, well, you want to have one of these, one of those, this. And I said, well, what type of beer should I make? And he said, a lot of people start out by making pale ales.
Sure.
And I thought, okay, let's do that. And I was thinking to myself, what's a pale ale?
What is this? Because you guys opened in '87, but when did you start home?
About 82.
82, okay.
1982, right. So.
And you were how old?
Oh, I have to do the math with that. But if I was 82, I would have been, born in 52, so 30.
30,
yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it was right after Jimmy Carter made homebrewing legal.
You're right. That's right. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of homebrew shops? Was homebrewing big back then?
It was starting to become something. You had a little bit of a developing subculture.
Sure.
Back then.
Okay.
So I got the equipment. I remember it was Pabst Blue Ribbon extract.
Nice.
Malt extract.
Yep.
And yeast, Red Star yeast. Red Star brewing yeast.
That's what we use for our pizza dough.
Well, they not too highly recommended, but that's what he had. Dry package of dry yeast. So threw it in and made my first batch of beer. And as the saying goes, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, that's my. So what? It was a pale ale.
Yeah, or similar to that.
Yeah. Mine was I think a brown ale malt extract.
Yeah. Yep. Something you don't want to start with a real crisp pilsner.
No.
So to my surprise, Russ saw what I was doing, and him and his friend went and got some equipment too, and then they started homebrewing. So we got the bug pretty bad.
And you were homebrewing in your apartment?
Well, it was a house, yeah.
Or a house, okay.
So kitchen stove, had a basement, so fermentation was in the basement.
Yeah. That's how we started.
Familiar story there.
Yep.
Get the boil overs and have to clean the stove again.
When we started, so my father-in-law bought me the kit, but my wife, Marie, the Blue-Eyed Blonde, that's our best-selling beer, so she wanted it to be like a couples thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we were supposed to get into it together, and she could not stand the mess. She hated it. Yeah. So I started out on the kitchen stove, and then I did that for a while, and then we got the turkey fryer with an old keg that I cut the top off.
Yeah.
And that was the new boil kettle, and then that was in the garage, and it was fun.
Yeah.
So you did that. That's in '82, and then. Tell me about, and you were a police detective, right? Were you?
Well, I became a detective.
Okay.
I was patrol that time and working third shift. So.
Okay. So you're home brewing, and then when do you decide to open a brewery, or was that? And how did you decide to do it together?
Well, believe me, it was almost immediately.
Yeah?
You know, something about you started home brewing and you became aware of some of the small West Coast breweries that were starting up. And, you know, we had the background, you know, with my grandfather at Schlitz, and then you started to see kind of the Milwaukee breweries declining as far as their popularity. And, you know, maybe this is something we could do to contribute to the city. And, you know, you just have that entrepreneurial spirit that kind of motivates you and kind of encourages you. And I just think we were sitting at the bar one day and talking about it. I said, you want to, I said to my brother, you ever think about starting a brewery? And he goes, yeah. And I thought, well, let's do it then. You know, and
what was he doing at the time?
he was working for Johnson Controls.
Okay.
And
So he had a good job then, probably.
He had a real good job. Yeah, he gave up a real good job for this. But the demands and hours of the brewery required full time, and he pretty much had the expertise and brains behind that motivation.
So when you guys opened in '87, did you keep the police?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Well, we both kept our jobs. So.
Got it. Oh, you both kept your jobs.
Right. So he was doing a lot of traveling back then, and I was there, and we were just doing the brewing, weekends, days off, vacations.
And that was like I read it was an old bakery.
Oh, an old bakery.
In the River West neighborhood, right?
Right. River West part of Milwaukee, which was west of the Milwaukee River.
Okay.
And it was the building had seen better days, so had to go through a lot of rehabbing, and then there were apartments upstairs, so we had to rehab those apartments. So that was a lot of work, some money there, but the rents from the apartments helped pay for the brewery.
That's how when we opened across the street 10 years ago, we had two, and then later 3 apartments, and that helped cover the mortgage. It was critical,
Exactly. And then, you know, Russ was able to have an idea how to put a system together.
Sure.
So nothing was new.
Yeah.
Obviously, nothing was new.
No.
So went to a lot of auctions, restaurant auctions. You know, just get something stainless steel.
Yep.
I remember Schlitz was closing. They had some auctions for some of their equipment. A tank that they would use for propagating yeast. We were able to get and use that for the brew kettle.
Okay.
And then Pabst, their kegs. They were declining at that point, and they had a lot of excess cooperage.
Yeah.
So we were able to purchase those.
I bought a bunch of kegs from a brewery in Minnesota that was going out of business. Yep.
Right. Randy Sprecher, he was at that time the big brewery in town. He was like a big brother for us.
Sure.
So we were able to get some of his cast-off equipment.
Yeah.
Louderton, for example.
Yeah, Randy's a great guy.
Yeah.
I don't know him super well, but every experience I've had with him, he's been awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw him April. You know, it comes between Milwaukee and California, Wisconsin, California. So he showed up for an event called the Blessing of the Bach. And
okay.
he usually makes that, so it's kind of good to get together.
That's awesome. So then it's 1987, and I read you rolled the barrels down to the first. What was the first tavern you?
First tavern. It was called the Gordon Park Pub. So
Gordon Park Pub.
It was a hole-in-the-wall corner bar.
Yeah.
But it had a little bit of an edge to it. You know, it was kind of cutting. You know,
sure.
They played punk rock music, for example. And, you know, people were experimental.
Yeah.
And they were willing to put different beers on tap. And they had, well, you call it indie music right now, but you know, there was a venue for some of the local bands, and it wasn't that big of a place, but everyone went there. The people that went there, you could tell, were someone that would try something different. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So got the keg there and opened up on December 2nd, 1987.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What was the first keg?
Well, there was two. We did 2 styles of beer: Klisch Pilsner, and then the River West style.
And River West was your recipe?
That was my recipe,
and
right.
Klisch was Russ's?
Russ's, yeah. So back in our homebrew days, Russ liked Pilsner Urquell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he tended to try and copy Pilsner Urquell with his homebrew. And for me, I always liked Anchor Steam.
Sure.
So I tried to make like an amber
Yep.
lager. You know, I didn't try a hybrid beer like a steam beer, but
Yeah.
it was just a straight amber lager that you know, get that caramel malt and Cascade hops in there. And
This is one of the beers that got me. The River West Stein was I mean, that was one of my first craft beers that got me hooked. You know, I'm sure people have told you that, but yeah, that's. And it's still this is your best selling beer still, right?
it's our flagship beer.
Yeah.
Still number one, top amber lager in the state.
That's awesome. Cheers to that,
Well,
right?
thank you. Thank you,
That's
sir.
great. Yeah. Cheers to River West. And the Klisch Pilsner. I was going to ask. So my best friend, we had that for his wedding, but you can't find. That's discontinued, right?
It was discontinued. Pilsners are kind of a tougher sell, I think, especially to craft beer.
Yeah.
And particularly back then. I think people wanted more full-bodied, hoppier,
Sure.
darker type of products. And it wasn't, I don't think Pilsners at that time were really understood
Yeah.
as far as a craft beer, although it was kind of like a bohemian-style Pilsner. So
Yep.
it, had the
No, it was
sauce
great.
hops in
Yeah,
there.
it was
And,
great.
Yeah.
Great beer.
And then with the name, too, Klisch, people thought it was a Kolsch, and it caused that level of confusions. But, it was always like a middle-tier beer as far as their sales, and it got discontinued. Brought back in some retro packaging that we've done,
Sure.
but right now, it moved on to, we went on the search for a lighter Pilsner, lighter lager that would resonate with people. And I think we kind of found that right now with our Dive beer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great beer too. Yep. I like that one. So did you always, you guys are obviously known for your tours, and that's been did you always have tours in a tasting room when you open?
Technically, they said we couldn't have tours, but we did them anyhow. You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, back then, you don't have an advertising budget.
No.
So you're really watching the pennies there. And there were probably two things maybe three. You had word of mouth, you had going to beer festivals, and then doing tours to get the name out of there.
Yeah.
So, tours.
Three things that still I think are, I mean, they still work today, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is still a people business.
Yes, definitely.
Foremost and first. And
Yep.
they want to know the people, they want to see the place, and who's making the beer, and they have that personal aspect about it. So
Who created East Side Dark? Because that's probably my favorite beer of yours.
yeah, actually, it's the favorite for the people in the brewery too.
Yeah.
The staff.
Yeah.
The guys on the floor that are working.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was. We actually had a third partner for a while, and that was his contribution.
Really?
Yeah, I made one batch, and and that was a dark lager, and so we had the light with the pills, with amber with the Stein, and then the East Side Dark came out, and then unfortunately there was a parting of the ways, and
Sure.
and so it was just Russ and I. So, but the beer maintained, and it's our most award-winning beer.
Yeah.
And like I said, production staff really loves it.
It's a great beer. So what was the beer landscape like in '87? So I was born in '85.
Okay.
So I wasn't drinking beer then. What was it like? I've read books and stories about it, but people didn't know what craft beer really was. Correct?
Right. It was education.
Yeah.
But that was all part of the mystique and
Sure.
the motivation, because you're kind of preaching the gospel of beer.
Yeah.
And you have this passion to explain it to people, and to say, yes, there's something better than mass-produced fizzy blonde drinking water. And then you found out, you educated yourself, you learned about Belgians, and you learned about the beers of the ales of Europe, and brewing process of Europe, like other parts of the continent, and you tried to apply it. The traditional stuff was really king at that time. So
Sure.
and I think it was like a time when tastes were exploding. And what I mean was people wanted to really refine their palate.
Okay.
And at that time, if you wanted wine, it would be like Lancers or Matus, or maybe Mogan David, or the jug wines. And if you wanted bread, it was Wonder Bread. And if you wanted coffee, it was Hills Brothers.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, gourmet became something people sought.
Sure.
And so even like with cigars, for example, it wasn't a whiteout. People were doing Havana cigars or whatever they could get close to it. And then you had it from breads to European type of dining to artesian this. And people were experimental and searching more. And that came to beers, too.
Sure.
So you started having a growing appreciation of something that was good and different, and then the more educated you became, you were able to help people with things like beer pairing, for example, explaining different styles, brewing different styles of beer, and just discussing it. We went to tastings and beer dinners, and
do you have
a passion for that?
Do you have a favorite style?
Oh, I still like the lagers. I like German lagers, but more like darks and ambers.
Sure.
That's for me. So Doppelbock, Box,
Yep.
Oktoberfest, my box, for example.
That's been it's funny to hear you talk about that, because that's my passion is kind of like, we're not a super crazy brewery, I like the German beers.
Yeah, so do I.
And the beers where, you can have 3 or 4 of them, and like they're easy on the palate, but there's history. And one of my favorite things about beer just in itself is just the history. And whenever like I'll do a new style, like I like researching the style and then figuring out why they made it or how they made it. And it's so regional. They use like and this better than I, but like if it tastes a certain way, it's because those are the only hops that they had, or the water that they had, or it's such a cool thing.
Yeah, mineral content in the water, and the hops tasting like this because of the soil characteristic.
I'm sure you've probably seen the industry, the ups and the downs, and the it's changed a lot over the years, right?
Right, definitely.
But
totally changed. Right?
But beer is still cool, I think.
Well, it's been cool for at least 6,000 years. So,
right.
There were new archaeological digs. They're finding beer-like substance on pottery. That go back even farther. Before you know it, Neanderthals were cooking something up.
No, I agree. I think, and you mentioned it earlier. Like, beer is still cool. And beer is still, it's about the people, right? Like it's still a people business. And if you take care of people and you have good beer, I think there's more to it than that, but those are the big things.
I think people go to a place for the experience as much as they want a beer style.
Yes, I agree. Maybe more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Might not remember the last beer they had, but they'll know they had a good time. Or that they met so and so.
Which your tour, like I think I've taken your tour probably 7 or 8 times, and finally like 2 years ago we went to the state fair.
Sure.
And I always wanted to do the Friday night tour, but it's hard. Like usually I'm working or making pizzas on Friday night, but I took Friday night off. We went to the state fair, and then we did your polka and fish fry dinner in the beer hall, and it was fantastic.
Well, it goes back to our up north roots.
Yeah.
So knowing about the fish fries and the polkas and family style seating, from the bars that our relatives had, and just that conviviality that you find in the small towns.
Yep.
Wanted to duplicate it. It was so easy, but it worked so well.
It's and there's something about beer, fish fry, and polka that it's as good as it gets, I think.
Throwing a little rock and roll in.
A little rock and roll, yeah. Are you a rock and roll guy?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
child of the 60s there.
Sure. So you have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. They require that.
Yeah, definitely Led Zeppelin.
So let's go back. So 87, you open, and then and you and Russ, are you guys are the only brewers? Is that
In the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yep.
we're brewing after work, days off,
Sure.
vacations, so whenever we could fit it in. So
Yep.
that or hauling and cleaning and doing the books and.
So how many years did you do that till you started? Well, did you always keep your police?
Yeah, I did until
Okay.
I was able to get a duty disability retirement in 1996. So
Okay.
then with the pension I got then, or duty disability retirement, I was subsidized for my brewery work.
Sure. So you did that, and you and Russ are going, and then you're in the old bakery spot, and so how many years did you do that?
10 years.
10 years.
10 years, and then we moved to the place
To the
on
place
the
that you're
river
in now.
on Commerce Street.
And we were talking about it earlier. For those of you out there who haven't been to River West, like now it's like a bustling neighborhood, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But when you open, I saw this picture. I mean, it was like where they dump the dead bodies over there.
Along Commerce, right?
Yeah, there was no sidewalks.
No,
it was
right.
overgrown.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
and now it's all full of
Yeah,
condos.
the first bank we had at that time wouldn't give us a loan because they thought it was a stink hole.
Sure.
And they ended up losing their shirts in trying to sell Arizona real estate. So they're now owned by a Canadian bank.
Of course, right? So you moved there in Commerce Street, and now now you've got a big production,
place, right?
Yeah. What was the move like? How did that change things?
Well, we went from a cramped space, like I said, we literally at that point we had to move something out of the way so you could get something done, then move it all back.
Yep. That's how we used
yeah.
to be too, yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
we were taking we had a walk-in cooler that the product was stored. We did have a distributor then, but each keg was loaded onto a hand cart, then wheeled out the front door. Imagine your typical 36-inch, door down a step, and then hoisted onto, but using what strength we had back then, into the bays of the delivery truck. So
Yeah.
very labor intensive.
Yeah,
So
that's
here,
when we would brew. Our mill was in the basement, so we would fill 55-gallon garbage canisters.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to haul them up the steps.
yep,
and
they
then,
get heavy.
Yeah, and then you'd have to dump them in the mash tun. And,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'd fill up a bag. What was it, 50-pound bag?
Yeah.
And that wasn't too easy.
So, then
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, but finally you had space.
Yeah, finally.
You looked around all this room, and it's on the river. It's kind of weedy and overgrown and everything, but the potential was there. So you had this the 3 big rooms, and you were able to spread out. For a while, there was a little basketball court in the back of the brewery.
Are you a hooper?
Well, I shot some rum, yeah,
A little bit,
but
yeah.
a little bit there, but boy, and now it's to the point where you can't even do that. So
Sure. So and then did you start doing tours right away in the new place?
Well, yeah, because you realize that was your bread and butter.
Yeah.
Right. That's what brought people in, and if you're lucky to buy a T-shirt or
Yeah.
maybe a 6-pack to go. So.
And
yeah,
now
tour.
I think you've got the #1 tour for sure in Milwaukee, right? I mean, it's the best brewery tour I've ever been.
We are certainly known for our tours.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was.
And you have
make a
Bernie's Chalet.
Bernie's Chalet from the old county stable.
How did that? Tell me about that story.
Well,
That's a
actually,
good
there was
story.
2 of them, so kind of an interesting story. They built one, and then they took it away and hid it underneath the bleachers, and the public wanted Bernie Brewer to come back. So it was 1982. They had the World Series run. They built the second one, put it in center field, and they had the mug and the slide, and that stayed there until County Stadium was closed. And my brother Russ called Sonny Bando, Sal Bando's son, who was in charge of liquidating the equipment. They're selling everything from the urinals to the seats to lockers to the public, and no one had made an offer on the second Bernie Brewer Chalet.
What happened to the first one?
It was still there.
It was still there. And this, for people who don't know, this was like Bernie Brewer was in a chalet, and then every time there was a home run,
you slide down the slide.
slide down the slide into a mug of beer.
Mug of beer, right.
And then the balloons would come up.
Right.
Yeah.
So they said, nope, no one made an offer on the chalet, so Russ got a check from the bank, ran down there, signed an agreement, arranged with an erecting company to bring it up to the brewery and then install it. Now, in the meantime, they're having an auction for other stuff, so a regular bidding option. And the second, which was the first one they made, was up for auction. And that was bought by a gentleman who owned an airline company. It was way out of our range to purchase. And he didn't have a place to store it. So Russ went up to him and said, well, if you want to, we got all this room at the brewery, you could come store it up by us. So he said, yeah, that'd be fine. And he never picked it up.
No way.
No, it just sat there for
So it's still there?
Well, yeah, we have it.
So you have two of them?
We have two, right.
I knew you had the one. I didn't realize you had.
Yeah.
Did you ever pay the guy for it?
Well, we figured storage fees would cover the cost of the chalet.
That's a great story. So I read also that you took a Thomas Jefferson pumpkin.
Supposedly, yeah. Right.
What's the story on that?
Well, bar owner that was one of the first that sold our beer. He came to the brewery, and he must have read something about Buffalo Bill in Haywood, California. And the Buffalo Bill's brew pub did a pumpkin beer, and they got some notoriety about it. And he said, it's coming close to Halloween. And he said, could you brew a pumpkin beer for us? And I had just seen a recipe claiming to come from Thomas Jefferson in the back of a homebrew magazine. And I thought, yeah, well, sure, I'll do that. And I found the recipe, went to the local pick and save, bought them out for a canned pumpkin, and, brewed a batch. And it went over pretty good. So it's
still one of your most popular seasonals.
One of our most popular seasonals. We do the pumpkin beer, and then we do also the Imperial, where it's aged in bourbon barrels.
Sure.
Yep. Where it's aged in bourbon barrels. So whether or not Thomas Jefferson did it, there is literature that the colonists would use other starches, because barley would be in short supply, and pumpkin was not that high on the list as far as inedible for people. So
sure.
Well, whether or not Monticello was a place where they brewed it or not, going to leave that to some of the historians out there. But
yeah,
it was credited for it, and it makes a good story.
Makes a good story. Yeah. It's all about the story.
It's
anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So people, for those who don't know too, like Lakefront, I think has really paved the way for, many Wisconsin breweries. Like, you were the first certified organic brewery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Westlake's
the first.
The new grist.
The new grist, right? Gluten-free. So we actually had to send a statement of process to the federal government. ATF, I think, was running at that time, because beer was considered a barley product.
Right.
And, with some conversations with the agents, they said, well, as long as you submit a statement of process, we can see running through the list of the higher ups and see if they'll approve it, and they did.
Sure.
So we were the first ones that could do a gluten-free beer made out of sorghum, authorized as a beer.
Which,
But no barley.
Which is great, and we keep it in stock all the time here, and people love it.
Well, that's one of the growth that you see.
Yeah.
In the beer industry is
Sure.
the better for you products.
So you're going on. We're going on 40 years. I mean, you've seen the ups. A lot of people talk about the industry nowadays and how it's changing.
Right.
But you've seen changes. I would imagine you've seen lots of changes in 40 years, right?
Right. Yeah. Totally. Like right now, what are the trends? THC beers, or seltzers. Lighter. Going back to the pilsners. People have an appreciation for pilsners. Flavored beers. Real off the wall experimental type beers. Just trying to find something that you could hit the public with it, get some traction.
Yeah.
Collaboration beers, marketing, pricing, all those things that were before we became like crusaders for craft beer, and you want to make a traditional beer as true as possible.
Yeah. Do you have like a guiding principle or anything like that's kind of kept you on the track for 40 years?
Well, I think, the standard.
Yep.
We've been there, get a good staff.
Yep.
The experience, competitively priced.
Yep.
Don't let anything bad get out to the market. Kind of do your research ahead of time. Look at what other people are doing. Try and have clean graphics that will approach people, and get them interested. Making sure that we're not too much in debt, not overcapitalized.
That's a big issue, right?
It went down. I think caused the demise of quite a few
breweries.
Places. Yeah.
I don't think people understand how much it costs to do some of that stuff, and then you're trying to sell, pints of beer to pay back hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars.
$9.99 6-pack. You got to sell a lot of those for those $1 million banknotes.
Yeah. And you guys have been pretty conservative. Like in reading, you've been pretty conservative.
Very conservative,
right?
Right. Yeah. So once you get the reputation with the lenders, then you can get the monies to expand some more.
Yeah.
And know that we can cover the debts.
Not biting off more than you can chew.
Exactly. Yeah. In the early days, like we were brewing with other people's junk.
Sure.
Literally cast off.
I read that Russ built his own bottling line.
Right. He did.
Yeah.
He did.
What was that thing like?
I hate to say it, it's a little bit like yours, Don. Except it was
our bottling line is not pretty.
Single bottle filler.
Yeah.
And he went through the back alley of the first brewery and he found this metal frame and he cobbled it together and he, I don't know all the technology, but it's something would fill the bottle and pop out, and then the capper would come down, and then you took it and hand labeled it, so he called it Gizmo.
Yeah.
And it was the source of frustration for a lot of the guys that were working it for the time. But eventually, I think it was an old Pepsi bottling line that we got that replaced old Gizmo there.
Sure.
But
that bottling beer, even when I started out as a home brewer, there's something about bottling beer that's it's not fun. It's like a difficult thing. Like whether you're doing it on a commercial scale or home brewing, like everybody wants, like as a home brewer, like you can't wait to just go to kegs, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You cramp on that cap and the bottle breaks. Or,
and then you gotta sanitize the bottle, clean the.
Make sure the fill level's fine.
Right.
And
yep.
Make sure they don't explode afterwards.
Yeah. Yep. So and then
it was a Meyer bottling line that we had.
Meyer
bottling line. Meyer bottling.
Okay.
Line,
So then we're in 1998 when we're in the new place, and then you eventually sold, right?
My part of the brewery? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
What was that like, or what was?
Oh, I was starting to walk away.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be working in the office.
Sure.
And what was I really going to do to make a difference, other than what I'm doing right now? Because
And were you brewing at the time, or were
No,
you,
no, I had stopped brewing.
You'd
So
stopped
that's
brewing.
the thing. You had young, hip, funnier, energetic tour guides. You had young,
Well, I don't know
strong.
about that. I think you're still the best tour guide I've ever had.
But younger people that actually went to brewing school for the brewing. And,
Sure.
Were willing to, people think it's a glamorous job, but folks, it's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. So let me tell you.
Yeah.
And you're lifting heavy things all the time,
Yeah.
regardless of how animated or automated it is. So, I left that to them. I didn't want to work on the floor. And so what was I really going to do other than, attend a beer festival once in a while, do something other people didn't want to do, and do podcasts.
Sure. Yeah, I read. Russ said he's the inside guy and you're the outside guy.
For what it's worth.
Yeah.
Get a few bucks in, that's all that counts right
Yeah.
now.
Yep. That's good stuff. Well, I think that's probably all that that I've got. I think. What do you?
One thing.
Yeah.
Because how everything started, you're going back,
Yeah.
and it's like how it's kind of reflective on what life is like, in that it was just one question that started us on this whole path. So I asked my brother, how do you make beer?
How do you make beer?
And then I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then I got the book. And it's like, it's just that chance encounter that you have with someone and you end up marrying them. Or it's a decision to learn something and it leads to a career. And it's just that split decision or that experience or something that motivates you at the time, and how you just end up taking a lifetime trip that is influenced by it.
Yeah. No, you're totally. That's well. Think about why we're sitting here today.
Yeah.
It's
It wasn't for that question.
yeah.
Right.
Yep. No, this has been great, Jim. Thank you very much for
You're
being here.
very welcome.
It's an
My
honor.
pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And folks, if you get the chance, you got to see beautiful downtown Ripon. I'm not kidding you. This is a great small town, wonderful Wisconsin secret. Let's come and walk the streets and see the shops and the architecture, and definitely have a beer at Knuth Brewing.
Jim.
Knuth.
Just like
knife.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.